My name is Caitlin, and I am a mortician. I was born in a little town in Hawaii called Kaneohe. My parents were both super Midwestern, though, so even though I grew up in Hawaii my whole life, to the point that I went to college, people were still like, "Oh, when'd you move here?" You know, like from the mainland, and I always to be like, "No, I'm actually from Hawaii. I'm just kind of a secret Hawaiian." I was always a pretty morbid little child, but most kids are until it gets beaten out of them as they get older. I remember when I was young, I had this sort of pair of ducks, a male and a female, and they lived in my neighborhood, and they were always really sweet. And then one day I went to the end of the road and they were just lying there dead side by side, and they hadn't been hit by a car or anything. They were just sort of perfect and dead and lying there. And I sat with them and I thought about their little Romeo and Juliet duck story, and I was convinced that the neighbors had poisoned them. And it's that sort of imagination of childhood and death that gets lost as you get older. After college, I was living in San Francisco and I wasn't really happy with what I was doing, so I decided that what I wanted to do was be a crematory operator. I wanted to burn bodies, and I just wasn't going to stop until somebody let me do that. There's a gentleman named Mike who ran the crematory who, for the first couple months I worked there, just wasn't having any of me. He was like, you know, he would just keep giving me things to do that were more and more ridiculous, like cremate this body, shave this corpse, you know, burn this baby, you know, just like over and over all these new things. And I just kept doing them, and each one was more ridiculous. Well, to me, because I had never done it before, it was more ridiculous than the last, but I was just gonna prove myself to this man if it was the last thing I did, so I just kept doing whatever he wanted me to do, and that was actually the most valuable thing I possibly could have done. There are not a lot of really like epic hero morticians throughout history, so probably my biggest influence as far as how I talk about death publicly is a woman named Gretchen Worden, who was the director of the Mutter Museum in Philadelphia. And the Mutter Museum is a medical museum. It's pathological anomalies, etc. So it's like fused babies in jars and things like that. And she would go on Letterman and NPR, and just with this really wry smile on her face, just be like, "This is why you should be interested in this." And everybody was always charmed by her. And even though she was talking about things that people didn't really want to hear or see, as far as other careers I could have, there's really no other option. As soon as the first day that I started doing this, I was just completely locked into it, and I've had really can honestly say I've had no other ideas since. There was a period where I could conceive of doing other things, and I don't think that I'm completely obsessed with being a mortician and a death theorist, and I'm not focused in on it pathologically, but it's just a very strange feeling where there's just no other option. So when I was about 5 or 6, we went to a museum, and it was a dinosaur exhibit, and I walked in and there was a huge like brontosaurus and a T-Rex, and they were sort of moving in like that. And I grabbed my dad and I was like, "Dad, these are alive, we need to get out of here." And my dad was like, No, kid, they're just animatronic." And I was like, "But they're moving." Which is kind of still my relationship with technology, in the sense that it's very Ghost in the Machine to me. Like what I see is what is relevant to me. I don't really look so much beyond how things work as much as I'm interested in the mystery of that they work. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with the internet. The first job that I had a side company that did online cremation, which means that you would put in a number on the internet and put in your information, put in your credit card, and you never actually had to talk to a living person at all. And something like 2 weeks later, you would get certified mail and the ashes would just be in it. So you would never actually talk to a living person at all about the cremation of your supposed, loved one who has died. And I always thought that was pretty ridiculous. I mean, not ridiculous, but just completely a sign of our times. And the idea that, we'd rather order pizza online, we'd rather order our clothes online, and we'd rather order our dead body disposal online. Something that seems really prominent with my generation is the idea of meaning and the idea of needing to give their lives meaning in some way. And growing up in the 80s especially, I think there was always this idea of like self-esteem and give your children this idea that they're unique, special snowflakes and important, and we all grew up with this idea that we have to do something meaningful and special. And because of the economy or for whatever reason, it's becoming more and more difficult for people to do that. And I realize that I'm incredibly lucky to have something that I'm so sort of myopically focused on and passionate about.